Okay, the next property that we're going to learn about that we're allowed to use in proofs is the definition of an angle bisector. So if I told you that we have angle ABC and that ray BD bisects that angle ABC. So here would be ray BD. We know that a bisector divides our angle into two congruent angles. So these two angles would need to be congruent to each other. So in a proof, if we know that something is bisecting an angle, we can then say that, like in this example, angle ABD would be congruent to angle DBC. We're allowed to say that those two angles are congruent to each other by definition of an angle bisector. So on the right side in your justifications column, you'd put definition of an angle bisector. So let's work a proof where we're going to use this. So our given is that ray FD bisects angle EFC and ray FC bisects angle DFB. So that's our given. So FD bisects EFC. So that means that these two angles are congruent. So in our proof, I am going to go say, oh, well, since FD is bisecting angle EFC, that means that angle EFD has to be congruent to angle DFC. Then I also know that ray FC is going to bisect angle DFB, so that would make these two angles congruent. So I can also go put that in my proof, that angle DFC is congruent to angle CFB. And why was I allowed to say that those two angles were congruent? Well, by the definition of an angle bisector. It told me in the given that that bisected an angle. So I see the word bisects in my given. I'm probably going to use definition of angle bisector somewhere in my proof. And so the last thing is I am trying to prove that angle EFD is congruent to angle CFB. So here's angle EFD, it gets a color. Here's angle DFC, it gets a color. Here's angle CFB, it gets a color. How many colors did I use? 3. 3 starts with the letter T. T for transitive. I'm going to use the transitive property. The angle EFD and angle CFB are both congruent to angle DFC, and so I can sandwich them together and say angle EFD is congruent to angle CFB by the transitive property. Voila!